Technology has changed a lot over the past 50 years, and this is evident when it comes to the use of it in movies. As the years have gone on, the effects and quality of the films have improved, whether it is the visuals, the sound, the effects, or the CGI. We can all agree that the quality has changed drastically. Although, that isn't the only thing that has changed in the film industry, as the promotional posters for these movies have also had a drastic improvement as the years go on. In this documentary, we will be discussing how technology has changed the way horror movie posters look over the years, from the 1970s to today. But first, a brief history on some of the oldest horror movie posters. The very first horror film was released in 1896 called The Devil's Manor. The poster is an all black and white picture with a drawing of the nobleman and the skeleton in the middle, with the title, writer and year at the bottom. The artist for this poster is unknown, but we can see how dated and simple it is from looking at it. 1922, Nosferatu was released, a film based on the Dracula books. Alban Grew was the artist behind the posters for this film, by first sketching out his initial idea on paper in black and white, and then eventually moving to the painting and drawing the two final designs in much more detail. The posters here are an improvement to the Devil's Manor one, as they are both visually more interesting to look at with all of the colours. Alban also made a more professional looking poster to be displayed at the local cinemas, with this art still centre of the poster. In 1932 we saw the first big change for horror posters, with the film White Zombie having two real people on the cover of their poster, instead of a drawing or painting like the previous years. From the 80s, there is a major similarity when it comes to looking at horror film posters, and I will be talking about them now, specifically three in particular. Friday the 13th, The Evil Dead and A Nightmare on Elm Street all have posters that are made from a painting, like most other 80s horror films. Spyros Angelakis designed the iconic Friday the 13th one, which is an image of the counsellors at Camp Crystal Lake in the shape of Jason Voorhees' body, which was then painted by Alex Abel for the finished product. The Evil Dead poster was originally planned out by the man called Mike Ditz, who designed the poster and took real-life pictures of a woman in the same pose, so the artist had a reference when it came to painting the final thing. And finally, the A Nightmare on Elm Street films. From the first to the fifth were all designed and painted by Matthew Joseph Peak. They all have a similar style, with all of the main characters in the centre of the painting, with the lead protagonist under threat from Freddy and his claws. Also, Freddy has direct contact with the camera each time, which works well with the tagline "Freddy's coming for you", as it does make it look like he's actually after you. There is a similar theme here, with not only them all being paintings originally, but with the colour scheme as well, with them all being a shade of blue, with darker colours surrounding it as well. They also all feature the main characters, with A Nightmare on Elm Street having Freddy and Nancy, The Evil Dead having what is supposedly Ash's arm, and Friday the 13th having Jason and the camp counsellors. Moving on now 20 years later, where we can see an obvious visual change in the horror posters, and how they differ to those in the 80s. Starting with the 1999 film Scream, in which we see a close-up shot of a real woman's face in shock, with her hand over her mouth and the title of the film just below. To me, I don't think this cover tells me it is a horror film, and without the tagline at the top, I wouldn't have been able to guess the genre without actually having to watch it. Then in 2004 we had the release of the film Saw, with the movie poster going for a simplistic approach with only a severed hand at the top, with the title at the bottom. The severed hand and the font are a big giveaway, but this is a horror film, and this is something great that they have managed to achieve with something so simple. Then finally, Hostel, a film that was released in 2006 with a similar design to the previous Saw poster, by just having a sharp looking tool and a title at the bottom right of the poster. The colours give off a dark feeling for the film, with the background and the colour of the font, which tells us that this will be something horror related. All three of these posters are different to the 80s ones, as instead of them all being paintings, they are all real photos taken by photographers. Also, by just having a picture of one simple image, like the woman, the arm and the hook, it is a much quicker and easier way to promote your film, instead of finding and paying an artist to make up a painting. Although, from looking at the examples from the 80s and now these three, the 80s ones come across more interesting to look at, with all of the added detail to the paintings. These are also shown that you don't have to go all out like the 80s posters did, as it seems that even if the poster is as simple as anything like Saw and Hostel, then it can still get the message across that they are horror films. And now looking at some more modern posters of films that have been released in the last 3 years, Jigsaw, A Quiet Place and Us. Jigsaw was released in 2017, which shows us a grainy, blurry looking shot of Billy the Puppet from the Saw franchise. It has an effect where even though it looks blurry, you can still clearly see what the image is in the background, while also drawing your attention to the title of the film as well. Then we move on to A Quiet Place, a film released in 2018 with the poster showing Emily Blunt's character Evelyn laying in a bathtub looking at the shadow of the monster in the film. Although the Jigsaw poster isn't of a real person, it is still a photo taken in real life of the life-size puppet used in the film, and just edited for the poster like the photo for A Quiet Place, as that too was just an ordinary picture of Emily Blunt in a room, but through technology they have managed to add a dark effect and the shadows. The movie Us was released in 2019 with again another similar theme to the other two modern posters, with it being again another real person of the main character. With the Us poster we see only Adelaide Wilson holding a mask of her face, which was originally a green mask, which they edited to look like she was actually holding a version of her face, something that wouldn't look as good if they were to do this in the 80s. Not only are these all real pictures like we saw in the early 2000s films, but they are all of main characters of sorts. As in Jigsaw, the main character is John Kramer, but he uses the Billy puppet to represent himself in the film, instead of showing his face half the time. The colour scheme on all of these posters are the same as well, with black and red being the prominent colours. The Jigsaw title in Billy's eyes, the text in A Quiet Place, and the clothes worn in the Us poster, with the background being a darker colour, suggesting the more modern horror posters feel the need to add dark colours to make the audience know that these are horror films.
My favourite movie poster is the UK one sheet for Evil Dead 2 by Graham Humphrey. Couple of reasons. When I first saw it, I was 12, 13 years old. I was walking past my local cinema and it really caught my eye. It was incredibly colourful, but it's hand drawn, it's hand painted, and it just looked nuts. There's this kind of creature coming out of a trapdoor in the middle. There's a guy on the side looking deranged, holding a chainsaw. There's a woman on the other side, kind of in this kind of position. And just the writing, just the overall kind of aesthetic and the style of the drawing just really grabbed me. And I just had to see that film. I didn't care how I was going to see it, but I had to see it. And at 12, I think maybe just about 13 years old, I managed to get into the cinema to watch Evil Dead 2. And it was the strength of that poster that absolutely sold it to me. And I think I've really got a thing for hand-drawn or hand-painted movie posters, and that just had everything. You know, I love horror as well. I love that kind of schlocky element, and it just really kind of grabbed me.
When it came to attempting my own movie poster, I brought in aspects from all the years I have spoken about. From the 80s, I added an effect that made it look like it was a painting. From the 2000s, I added a simplistic look, and then with today, I added the main character in the centre with the black and red theme. In conclusion, we can clearly see there has been a lot of change in the horror poster industry, which is just due to how technology has improved over the years. If I had to pick my own favourite style, it has to be the paintings from the 80s, especially the Nightmare on Elm Street ones. I just really like the detail and think that really draws you in to just really pick up every small thing in the poster.
Here's Johnny!